Welcome back to Yoshi Entertainment, everybody. It's no surprise that we're back here again. Literally everybody who was using the common sense that God gave them and a functional mind when it comes to relationships already knew we would be revisiting the situation in the way that we are now. One thing that really aggravates and annoys a lot of people is people like to sit up. Some people like to sit up on the internet and say very sick-minded, perverted, dysfunctional things. But then when it is time to take accountability or to backtrack, whenever they have to eat their words, some of these same people who were saying those said perverted, sick-minded, dysfunctional things, they're nowhere to be found. I've said before, they like to run off the internet and hide like roaches whenever it's time to really take accountability and to admit that they were wrong. Now, some people might be asking, you came out of the gate swinging. Where Nick Cannon is concerned, what are you talking about? This man then ran to the Breakfast Club and set up on their podcast and talked about how he's now having second thoughts, regrets, I believe. He just won't say it out loud. But that's what it sounds like to me, regrets about these shenanigans he has willingly participated and partook in. The perverse sexual debauchery that he intentionally got himself involved in. And now these children are going to end up feeling the effects of later on in their life. They're feeling right now how the actions of irresponsible, immature, no accountability having, dysfunctional, perverted individuals, adults, and I'm using that term very loosely, get together and have children, and then it negatively impacts those children. I'm most concerned about the children. I only feel bad about the children in this scenario. Now, I'm going to read to y'all some things that he said on that podcast with the Breakfast Club, because I don't want anybody saying I'm putting words in his mouth. Oh, that's not what he said. You're taking something out of context. We're not doing that today. I'm going to read to y'all some of the stuff that he said. And if you don't believe me, it's right here in the article. And on top of that, he said it from his own mouth on the podcast. It's on YouTube. This man set up and talked about how he was reflecting, if you will, on his decision to sit up and have literally a dozen children. Then he said that it was due to trauma, that it was basically a trauma response. Now, I want y'all to all remember that, because people, I don't know what's wrong with people. Maybe, once again, they're not using the common sense that God gave them. Maybe it's just blatantly an intelligence issue. Maybe they just have a lack of intelligence. But these celebrities, people in general, will sit up and say things, then they will backtrack or say something that's the complete opposite, literally contradicting themselves in the same sentence sometimes, in the same conversation. And people will act like the first thing that they said, they didn't actually say. It's the lack of intelligence and the ignorance for me. That's why it will be called out, because this will not be ran amok, so to speak, within the community and society without somebody saying something. So everybody remember, one of the first things that he said was him having all these kids was a trauma response. Now, some other things that he said, and I quote, I just didn't do the work. So then I looked up 12 kids later and I'm like, wow, I could have did things differently. He said, adding, but I stand firm on all my decisions because I love all my kids. I love my family infrastructure, but I know it all started from a place of pain and not really healing properly, end quote. The first thing I have to say about this is no child wants you to wait until you are 12 children deep to say some mess like that. The idea is to not have so many children who you've broken homes with, who you've created broken homes with, to then finally say, oh, I probably should have did things differently. The idea is to not have any broken homes at all. The idea is you need to get yourself together mentally, financially, emotionally before you go out and you decide to be with somebody and have children. Because your children will feel the hurt and the pain of you not being the best that you can be for them. Those children deserve better. Like I said, the idea is to get yourself together first and be functional. I've talked about this all the time on this channel. Functionally minded, non-toxic, so that you can help create more of that in your children. The idea is to get yourself together first before you go out and go be with another individual whose life you might screw over, or also have children who you will screw over because you have not dealt with your trauma. Deal with yourself first. Deal with your trauma first. Don't make it somebody else's problem. But instead you have this, what we call microwave mentality. this instant gratification where people don't want to do the work necessary. They don't want to pray. They don't want to give it to God. They don't want to have a relationship with God. They don't want therapy. They do not want to get themselves together. They don't want to deal with their own trauma, but they want the relationship. They want the sex. They want the kids. And it ruins everything. It ruins people. It creates messed up situations. Once again, while I could have did things differently after 12 kids is a slap in the face to those kids. It's a little too late for that. Now, what you should do anyways, because that's the non-mediocre best thing to do, is to get your life right now. But again, it's still a slap in the face that you would even wait to this point to even say that. And not before. And nobody wants to hear, oh, you're being hard on him. You're just judging him. He's trying to take accountability, don't you see? No, he's not. And that's low-level mediocre thinking. He's not taking accountability. We'll talk about that later, though. The second thing I wanted to bring up, remember what I said about the hypocrisy, the contradiction, even within the same sentence? So you admit that you could have done things differently, but you stand firm on all your decisions. You love your kids, which I honestly question, and I have the right to do so based on his very raggedy decisions. I don't want to hear, oh, you can't question his love. Yes, I can. By the display of his actions, I can certainly question it. But then you said you love your family infrastructure, even though it started from a place of pain. Mediocre, low-level, dysfunctional thinking. Once again, I don't think you can say, honestly, that you can stand firm on your decisions while also saying you could have done things differently. Specifically, the situation where it pertains to these children where they're at right now. I honestly think, like I said before, he wants to regret these decisions, but his lack of accountability and responsibility won't allow him to. If he was really regretful and he was taking accountability, he would have said, I don't stand on my decisions. I regret my decisions, actually. They were horrible. They were mistakes. Not even mistakes. They were intentional, raggedy decisions that I made that I should not have. Now, I don't regret my children. They're blessings from God, but I regret the decisions and what I did that helped get them, that caused them to be in the situations that they are in now with me. I could have waited. I could have gotten married, had a functional relationship where I had 12 kids who were all under the same roof in one family together, who I could have given my attention to every day I came home. But instead, I had to do it the dysfunctional way, the hardest way possible, and go out and have a bunch of broken homes with multiple women. Now, as for that infrastructure, what infrastructure? The infrastructure of dysfunction? Of mediocrity, like I said before, because he doesn't have an infrastructure where it pertains to family and the family unit, so to speak. He doesn't even have a cracked slab. His infrastructure is uneven, muddy ground that he tried to build something else over and on top of. And quite clearly, it's not working. It's been not working. There have been people who came out and said, Nick Cannon, this is not going to work. It's going to hurt your children the worst in the long run. And he still went out and he did it. He even had the audacity once to have an attitude when people told him, hey, are you going to stop having children now? You going to get the surgery? We know you like having SCX. We know you like going around and just doing whatever, spreading it wide, laying it low, whatever. The least you can do for the children is to get the surgery so you won't be creating more broken homes. I'm gonna move on, but I really want people to understand how much it is a slap in those children's faces, how careless it is, morbidly so even, to wait till now to finally say, oh, you know what? I probably shouldn't have did this. Probably should have did this differently. Yeah, this might have been because of some trauma I never got resolved. That was my responsibility, not my fault that it happened to me, but my responsibility to get help for it, but I didn't. That's a slap in those children's faces, especially considering the fact that many people did speak out about this situation and said he needs to stop this. This is not right. So he can't say nobody tried to tell him. And I am curious as to why now, because once again, I don't believe in coincidences. Only shady things have ever come out of Hollywood and these Hollywood celebrities I've told y'all before. I don't even trust the reason why he's saying this now. Are we to believe that this is because he finally did understand what he was doing was wrong? It finally set in, that it was some kind of delayed response, a delayed epiphany, if you will? Is it because he wants to be the victim now? Is there something coming up? Because you know these celebrities, they always do stuff for publicity and attention and clout. So either there's something coming around the corner, or he's just doing this now because he wants to be on his victim tour, if you will. Anyways, he goes on to make some more statements. Again, people are thinking he's taking accountability. I really don't feel like he really is. And I quote, "It wasn't like I was acting out," he continued. "It was more of being careless, being frivolous with my process because I could do it, because I had the money, because I had the access to whoever and however I wanted to move," end quote. Then it says, whenever he was looking back on those choices, he claimed he wasn't mature enough to plan better. This is why people who are mature enough, who clearly have and are using the common sense that God gave them, they have and are operating in wisdom and intelligence, tell people who are clearly moving in immature, inconsiderate, irresponsible ways not to do certain things. When people say, hey, don't go out and mess with that person, don't go out and get all them babies, they're not just saying it because they're trying to be a hater. They're trying to keep you from making stupid decisions and ruining your life. But clearly he missed that memo. And a lot of the people who support him also missed that as well. So the lesson here is when somebody tells you not to do something and they're rooted in maturity and functionality, you about to go out here and make a stupid decision and they're telling you, hey, don't do that. That's not a good idea. You're going to end up hitting the wall. You're going to fall in the pothole. Again, they're not trying to be a hater. They're not trying to keep you from living your best life. They're not trying to tell you what to do or judge you, whatever excuse or however they want to frame it. They're actually trying to keep you from messing things up for you or for somebody else. And not being mature enough to plan better, as he claimed here, is not an excuse either. It's only an excuse for a lot of black people because they like Nick Cannon. But see, when the roles are reversed, when it's a different situation, when these same people are on the receiving end of something that's bad that's happening to them because somebody else wasn't mature enough to plan better, now all of a sudden, it's not okay. It's not an excuse. This ninja goes on to say, and I quote, "Then obviously life happens as well. So I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to have 12 kids, he continued. It was more about like, yo, I'm going to just live life and have fun and whatever happens, happens. I can handle it," end quote. Common misconception, you cannot always just handle when whatever happens or whatever's gonna happen actually happens. No, you can't always handle it. That's another thing that people do that is a mistake. Thinking, oh, I'll just deal with the consequences later, or I'll just deal with it later. I can handle it later. Well, clearly you can't. Because otherwise you wouldn't be on the Breakfast Club basically talking about how you regret your decision. Do not put off the responsibilities and consequences of today's decision for tomorrow. And he also said, and I quote, "Being almost 45 now, I could sit back and if I would have thought the process through a little bit more and took time to actually do the inner work, things might have been a little different in certain scenarios," he said, end quote. So once again, what I'm hearing more of is I regret my decisions. I probably should have thought this through, but still him saying, oh, but I still stand on what I did though. I still stand on what I did. It sounds like he's trying to save face. He just doesn't want to admit that he was blatantly wrong and that people did try to get through to him and he ignored these people, did what he wanted to. Now that he's getting older and those children are getting older, he's now starting to see where he messed up at. Again, I keep reiterating that this is messed up because those children deserve better than, oh, I waited to the last minute to realize this wasn't a good idea. I shouldn't have did this. The people around you who you might hurt, whose lives you might ruin, the broken homes, the children that you bring into this world deserve better than that from you as a person, as an adult, as a parent, as a father. The reason why I keep maintaining that he has not really taken accountability, he's not taking accountability fully, is because of this next statement right here. Whenever they ask him, okay, all of that, I should have done things differently. Does that mean you wouldn't have ended up with 12 kids? He replied by saying, and I quote, "I don't know, because I've always said this. Every child that I had was made out of love, and they were strong relationships," end quote. Once again, this is where I have to call out the hypocrisy and the contradiction, because you literally said earlier in the conversation that those kids, having all those kids, was a trauma response. So which one is it? Are they trauma responses or were they made out of love? Because they can't be both. They have to be one or they have to be the other one. And we all know that they weren't made out of love. They were made out of lust. You didn't love those women. You lusted after them. You laid down with them. You had children with them. There was no love anywhere in that situation. I think it was a breeding kink more than it was anything else. And even let's go back to the excuse of, him making it seem like he was a bit younger when he was making these decisions, that he was more immature. Nick Cannon is an entire grown behind adult. Even when he was with Mariah Carey and he was married to her, he was an entire adult. What are you talking about? You were an entire adult and you were still too immature to not know how this was going to go? Are you kidding me? So again, either it really is a maturity, an ignorance, a lack of wisdom and mediocrity issue, or it's just blatant lack of intelligence and all the rest of that stuff too. Now let me address this strong relationship point that he made, because who is he talking about? If he had that strong of a relationship with any of those women, he would have married one of them. And I hope he's not talking about his kids concerning this strong relationship that I'm putting in air quotes, because he can't have that strong of a relationship with any of those children if he is being spread 12 ways thin, so to speak. They're all in separate households. They're not under the same roof. I don't think he visits them that often because he got jobs. The parents got jobs. They all got places to be. So where is a strong relationship? Where are these strong relationships going to come from? Now, this is an issue we've got to point it out that a lot of women have. I'm not saying that all women have and that all men do this kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying some women have this very issue with men in relationships right now. Many women do. They don't want to be drugged through the mud of a man's bad decisions. They don't want their children to be drugged through the mud of their bad decisions. And this is not me letting those women off the hook, because they were just as goofy as he was. And they really need to be called out just as much as he's being called out. Although at the end of the day, I've spoken about this too, Nick Cannon was the man here. He was the one with the decision-making power. He was the one who offered the situation. They took him up on it. He was the one who had the more authority in the situation. And I don't want to hear you're just saying that again to let the women off the hook, because men love to talk about how they run everything, they're the head of everything, they're the leaders, they have all the authority and the control. But then when it comes to taking responsibility for the decisions of all of that, or the lack of, especially the lack of smart decisions, they don't want to own this authority all of a sudden. All that control, all that, we're the leaders, we're the head, we can do what we want to, make decisions, this, that, and the other. Despite all of that, once again, I am stating that both him and all those women are at fault for this situation with these children right now. He was goofy enough to offer up this, whatever it is, like I said, perverse debauchery of a situation. They were goofy enough to take him up on it for whatever reason. And I believe one of these days, we're probably going to see the real reason behind why all these women decided to be with him in this way. Some people might think, it's just because they were goofy, like you said before. But I still think there's some other reasons that we haven't become aware of, if you will, just at this moment. I could be wrong, but we'll see, I guess. So once again, he admits he should have gotten therapy after his divorce with Mariah Carey. And some people took that as, you're trying to blame Mariah Carey for how you've been acting. I don't think that's what he was trying to do. Y'all know how some people get when it comes to Mariah Carey. He should have got the help that he needed. As I said before, whatever happened to him, whatever trauma it is that he's talking about, it's not his fault if somebody did something to him. He had no control over it, etc. Although it is his responsibility to be a better person, to do better, to be the best him that he could be, not just for himself, but for the people around him, for God. Because why wouldn't you want to be your best self for God first, for other people, and for yourself? Why wouldn't you? Another thing that we can address is the fact that there's so many people who wish they had the kind of money that Nick Cannon had. And it's not that they're not working hard for it. They are. They just don't have the job that he has. Maybe they didn't sell their soul to Hollywood. Maybe they're not out here doing crazy stuff. But if they had the kind of money that Nick Cannon had, they would be in a better disposition, because unlike him, they actually wanted better. They wanted therapy. They wanted to do better. They just didn't have the money to get them there. That's something that I will always, like I said before, call these celebrities out for. Having all this money to have therapy, to make things better for themselves, to pay for whatever they need to help them through their trauma, and choosing not to do it because they would rather wallow, once again, in the mediocrity of the dysfunction than actually do better. Like, you've got to be a sorry individual to have the money to do better, but just say, forget it on the willpower. Whereas there are people who wish to God they had that kind of money and influence, because the willpower is there. They want better because they don't want the dysfunction. They want to do better. for God, themselves, and other people, but they just don't have the money to help them get there because it does take money sometimes. A lot of times, really. Now, he's finally admitting that he left a lot of trauma in his wake because he never addressed the root cause of his own trauma and fixed it. Now, once again, the reason why I'm not here for these goofy comments like, oh, look at him, he's finally taking accountability, is because I don't believe he really understands the weight of what he's actually done. And maybe he's trying to protect himself from the real regret and remorse that he's going to feel if he actually does really realize the weight of what he's done, how he's messed up these children for real by doing all this goofy mess. Speaking on his unorthodox situation and household, claiming that monogamy was never really his thing, I'm assuming because something that he saw growing up, the environment that he endured growing up, and that trauma sustained from watching whatever it was, having the first-hand experience and seeing whatever it was he saw growing up that was dysfunctional. Now, where it pertains to that, first, I'm a little confused on monogamy not being his thing. Was monogamy not his thing whenever he married Mariah Carey? Rich, famous Mariah Carey? Apparently monogamy was your thing when you married rich, famous Mariah Carey, I think. Secondly, the end goal, if you will, the reasonable, mature, responsible thing to do would have been to say, hey, if I grew up in a dysfunctional environment, I saw dysfunctional things, I realized that it didn't work because it traumatized me as I experienced it, as I grew up in it. I better not do this to other people. I best not bring up my own children in this way because I know what that feels like. I know the trauma that you will sustain if you have to see this, grow up in it, grow around it, so to speak. I need to do better. I need to be better. Once again, for God, for other people, and for myself. And if I can't do that, if I can't find the willpower to get the help that I need to heal from this trauma, I need to stay the heck away from people so that I won't hurt them because I refuse to do what's necessary. I refuse to handle my responsibilities, which is to take care of the trauma that's not my fault, but is my responsibility to heal from. That would be the right thing to do. That's the idea of it all. But see, he didn't do that. I know that the default setting for our very human nature is to repeat what we saw growing up. We are creatures of habit, unfortunately, very bad habits. But that is the fight of life. You get up, you choose to be a better person because it's the right thing to do. And because you don't want to cause other people trauma and misfortune like how you were caused. But I guess that's too much like right for some people, unfortunately. And these same people are the celebrities of the world, the people who, unfortunately, a lot of people look up to and take as an example to live by. These are the same people that are out here having babies. I should have probably thought about this before. 12 babies deep, 6 baby mamas in after an ungodly plethora of bad decisions. These are the people that's having babies. That's why I keep saying I feel sorry for these children out here. Now, this article goes on to list all of the precious little children, God bless their souls, and all of the mothers of said precious little children, God bless them with some more common sense. Yeah, I said it. God, please open Nick Cannon's eyes. Let him see he does actually need therapy and Jesus. Remember, he was on that one thing some while ago where one time he was like a black Moor. Then I think he decided to be like with the Hebrew Israelites or something like that. He was bouncing around from religion to religion. He needs stability and not be double-minded. Like I said before, he needs Yeshua and he needs therapy. And I hope to God and I pray to God, and I mean that for real, y'all, that he gets it so he can stop doing all this goofy mess that he's been doing all this time. And for those of you who think I'm overreacting, that it's not that big of a deal, and I quote, Cannon joked that he was done having kids after he struggled to name all 12 during an interview. End quote. We're going to pause it right there. Once again, this is how I know he does not understand the gravity of his actions. Probably still doesn't, because nothing about this situation is a joke. There's nothing funny about this situation, first of all. He should have been done having kids, broken homes. Like, it's one thing to be within a functional relationship and y'all are raising these children in a non-toxic environment. Have as many children as you can afford to have, as God blesses you to have. But he should have been stopped having all these kids the way that he's been having them like this. This is how I also know he didn't have these children, or at least I don't believe that he did, out of love. Because you wouldn't have been struggling to remember all 12 of their names. What it sounds like to me is that Papa was a Rolling Stone type of scenario. There have been people who talked about how their father had multiple children, either within the family or outside of the family. And because they were not around all the time to spend time with these children, they struggled to remember names. It's a hurtful thing for a child. I told y'all before, this stuff never goes away. This internet, unfortunately, is forever until God comes back. Them children could possibly see this. Oh, Dad struggled to remember my name in an interview. Imagine being the child whose father struggled to remember your name in an interview. And I don't want to hear no, it's 12 of them. That's his kids. There's no excuse for him not to know the names of those children. And the sad part is, or another sad part, is all of the people, especially within the community, co-signing his debaucherous, perverse behavior. Oh yeah, go ahead. You should be polygamous. Have all these kids. Have as many women as you want to. Why? So you can have more children to not remember their names? See, some people will sit up and co-sign this kind of behavior. And then whenever this kind of stuff happens, they get quiet. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said people co-signing debauchery, mediocrity, ignorance, dysfunctional habits, mindsets, mentalities, behaviors. And then when the bad happens, they don't want to own the bad of what they co-signed and celebrated and said, oh, people should be able to do and have. Because it looks mighty bad, once again, to be forgetting your own children's name. I don't care how many kids you got. They're your kids. You claim you made them out of love, but we know you didn't. You made them out of lust. They're your children, but you're forgetting their names. I digress. Anyways, this article goes on to then state, and I quote, at the time he said on the Really Good Podcast that the reason he had so many children was from his king complex. I really think I'm a king, he said, going on to explain that kings need a lot of children to pack their courts, end quote. This is something else we need to address in the Black community. A lot of people are not going to like this, but I'm going to say it anyways. All this, hey queen, hey king, we need to bury that mentality. I said what I said. A lot of people might think, oh, well, it's empowering, you know? We can be empowering without putting ourselves on a pedestal. I do believe that kind of mentality and verbiage, if you will, puts us on a pedestal and it makes us think more highly of ourselves than what we really are. And again, it's not about, oh, you're not being empowering or you're being self-depreciating. Again, it's about not thinking more highly of yourself than what you really are, because then you start making goofy decisions like this. Him calling himself a king. Nick Cannon, you're not a king. You've never been a king. You will never be a king. None of us are kings. None of us are queens. Jesus is king. How about that? Yahshua is king. How about that? That's the mentality that we need to have. Because when you think you're a king, these are some of the goofy decisions that may follow. Him thinking, oh, I'm a king, so I got to have all these children by multiple women. Now, I don't know if that's really true, if that's really how he thinks, but if you take a look at his situation, it does definitely reflect that, of that kind of situation. How when we had kings back in the day, they would have multiple women who they would be sleeping with, they'd be married, they'd have royal children, and they'd have women outside of wedlock whose royal claim to the throne was not legitimate because they were outside of wedlock. They weren't had by the queen, so to speak. And even in those situations, it was nothing but hell, misery, and dysfunction. There would be fighting. Sometimes the king and his heir, his legitimate heir, if you will, they'd fall out with the people because of something that they did, some way that they screwed the people, the common people, over. And then the common people would say, okay, well, fine, we'll rally behind your illegitimate child then. Or there'll be like a second or third son who's not directly in line for the throne, who wanted the throne, who would say, hey, if you rally behind me and help me overthrow my brother, I'll make sure y'all have this, and I won't do this like how he does that. And it caused civil fighting within the kingdom. So for him to even sit up and say, oh yeah, I'm like a king. I think I'm like a king and I got to have a bunch of children to pack my court. Again, the lack of intelligence in that thinking. So not only is he immature, but again, I'm questioning his intelligence once again. Because even if you think back to those historic times, it was only misery, hell, trauma, and dysfunction for usually everybody except for the king. All of the women had to worry about, well, will my child have the chance to sit on the throne? Well, maybe I don't want my kid on the throne. I at least don't want them trying to take out my child because they think that my child is a threat, even though he doesn't want the throne. I don't want my daughter, who's of royal birth or royal blood, to be married out to some old guy who he's just going to use for a pretty face and you know what else. And then the kids were fighting amongst each other. So like I said, it was nothing but dysfunction and misery and trauma and hell for everybody involved, usually except for the king himself, which again reflects Nick Cannon's situation actually to a T. There were some people on social media who had some things to say, and I quote, Dr. Bryant was correct in her assessment, yet he still chose to argue with her, end quote, somebody from YouTube said. I believe that's the doctor that I was talking about earlier, Dr. Bryant, who he sat down with, who he clearly didn't listen to. Anyways, though, another person said, and I quote, anything but going to therapy, end quote. Unfortunately, that is very true for both men and women. There are both men and women who will literally do everything, traumatize other people, hurt other people, break other people's hearts, create broken homes, traumatize their children, instead of going to therapy, waiting until they're a better person before they get into a relationship with somebody so they won't ruin somebody's life or create a broken home or traumatize their child. Another person on YouTube said, and I quote, he should stop talking for the sake of those children, end quote, which is very true. But clearly, again, that's too much like right for him to handle. Everything that he's done, and that's what people mention as a reply underneath this, everything he does, he doesn't even consider. It's like he's not even considering the sake of those children or those children at all. Every decision he's made is to satisfy himself, the lust of his flesh, to satisfy and edify the perverse, dysfunctional mindsets that he has willingly embraced and fallen in love with. Now, this person said something that I'm not going to repeat because those are allegations, speculations, their personal opinion. I'm not going to repeat it, but you can see it right there on the screen. You can read it for yourself. These are allegations. I certainly hope that's not why he had all those babies, but I don't put anything past these celebrities like I've said before. Somebody else once again brought up what I've been talking about, and I quote, creating other humans in the name of trauma is the very reason why psych evaluations need to be mandatory before having kids and before having more than one child, end quote. I know that might seem a little restrictive and crazy, but the alternative, once again, are broken homes. Children who are traumatized, who then grow up to be adults who are traumatized still because, like their parents before them, they embrace the trauma instead of getting help, the help that they need, giving it to God, having a relationship with God. Because some of this stuff is going to take some divine intervention to fix, whether people want to believe that and accept it or not. And then they go on to traumatize other people and then bring children into this world to traumatize. And the cycle continues over and over and over again. So before anybody thinks that it's a little too much or it's a little off the deep end or crazy to have somebody put through a psych evaluation before they are deemed allowed to have children in this society, why don't you think about how there are some people walking around right now that are crazy in the head because of the trauma that they sustained due to some goofy mess their parents did? How you may have had trauma, sustained some kind of trauma from somebody who inflicted it on you due to what happened to them because of their parents, their mother, their father. Some other people on YouTube said, and I quote, please stop having children in response to trauma. Seek therapy for your troubles, end quote. And I quote, you willingly created those broken homes. And I quote, now the kids have to deal with his trauma decisions. Eye roll emoji, end quote. Another woman here on YouTube posted basically what I talked about before, how there were many people, both men and women, who were co-signing this goofy behavior. How our society tries to force this idea that this polygamous relationship, that the idea of a polygamous relationship should be the standard due to the failure of many adults to have self-control, to get therapy, reframe their mindset, restructure their mindset to the right way, settle down with one person, commit to that one person. Because of the lack of self-control and the failure to commit to one person, because they're too dysfunctionally minded, too mediocre, too low thinking, if you will, to understand that they can indeed have self-control, that they don't have to go out and lay down with everybody and everything that has a pair of legs and something in between them, that they can have the strength to have self-control. They have to choose to and then work to do that. Work to be able to do that, and that it is possible to marry one person, be in love with that one person, and stay with that one person. But it depends on you, your self-control. If you're willing to surrender certain things that you struggle with to God, get therapy, practice being a better person, put into practice doing the right things and being functionally minded. But people don't want to do that. They want to be lazy and mediocre because they like the idea, again, the mindsets, that laziness, not doing the right thing because it satisfies their lust. They want to be perverted. They want to be lustful. They want to do everything wrong because it doesn't require anything from them. They don't have to be responsible or accountable. Now, I said both men and women, but I'm going to be real honest with y'all. I saw a lot of men, and this is not to bash men. So if it don't apply to you, if you don't believe in this, if you're not dysfunctional in this way, then you shouldn't be offended. I did see a lot of men celebrating this behavior, co-signing this behavior. There were some celebrity men who came out again and tried to push this narrative, push this agenda once again to restructure how people think within our community, to force people to believe, oh, well, you don't have to have self-control. You could just have multiple women. If you're a woman, get used to the idea that you might be number 2, number 3. Your children will come last, maybe second to last. Even if you are baby mama number 1, you're still going to have issues with the other ones, not you being the one, the other ones you will have to deal with. She's essentially saying, where are all those men who supported, who co-signed, who justified his goofy polygamous mess now that he's saying he regrets it all? Because that's really what he's saying, that he regrets it all. Where are all those people who co-signed it? I told y'all before, they always scatter like roaches and hide off the internet because they're trying to save face and they don't want to admit that they were wrong for promoting what they did, for pushing that narrative, for pushing that agenda. Because they don't want to take accountability. They don't want to be better. They don't want to do better because they're just mediocre human beings. Now, some people like to debate the whole poly thing, especially when it pertains to Nick Cannon and other celebrities like Neo, because he's another one that be doing crazy mess like this. Now, polygamy is the practice of having multiple spouses, which, as we all know, is illegal in the U.S. Now, outside of the U.S., due to cultural and religious things they got going on, there are men who have multiple actual wives. Like, they married these women. They're in the same house with this man. The children are usually all under the same roof. That is polygamy. It's still dysfunctional because of all the things that we've talked about before. Now, what he is doing is polyamory, which is the practice of having multiple sexual partners. In other words, like how the older individuals of yesteryear used to call it debauchery, sexual immorality. That's what it is to me. Polyamory, debauchery, basically. And also still dysfunctional. Anyways, y'all let me know what y'all think and how y'all feel about all of this down in the comments below respectfully. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all all have a very blessed, beautiful, and safe day.